We are controlling the broadcast.
For the next hour we will control all that you hear.
You are about to experience the knowledge and insights of the Media Mothership.
Alright, welcome to episode 95 of Media Mothership, broadcasting out of Edge Radio Studios in Nipaluna, Hobart, Tasmania. On this show we explore how media shapes our understanding of the world around us. And I reckon we are streaming on YouTube and Twitch, which you can find by searching Media Mothership. Or you can listen to us on the internet at edgeradio.org.au or via your FM system on 99.3 FM if you're in the Hobart metropolitan area. As you're listening, feel free to send us a message on the YouTube or Twitch chat. I think we're definitely on Twitch. I'm not sure if we're on YouTube because I do see a little Twitch symbol in the chat sign there. So probably message us on Twitch or send us an SMS on our mobile phone number 048888 11707. I'll try to keep an eye on the message screen. I'm your host, Craig, ex-academic, joined by current academic, Ashley, PhD student. Hey, Ash.
Hello.
I tried both names out there. They felt good.
Yeah, I'm glad they came across well.
Semiotically,
yeah,
they worked. I said the name, you responded to the name. I achieved.
Yeah,
semiotic.
I'm like a dog. It's like the Pavlov, like shake a bell.
And I'm foreshadowing a bit because we are going to be diving deep into one of the core academic theories, semiotics. And to achieve this potential, we've brought in a return guest, the second year computing studies student, Kentaro.
Hello, everyone.
Excellent. Well, we're all here. I feel like I should say mission accomplished already.
Yep, we're done. Time to go home.
I'm hoping we're not going to peak too early. So today's topic is going to be diving into the world of semiotics. And the reason we're doing this is that we had a wonderful, or Ashley's created a wonderful series of podcasts.
Debatable.
Titled? What's the title of the podcast
Gosh,
again? It's
Popular Culture and Theory, I think.
Culture and Theory. A zinger. Did you have any alternatives for that name? Did you go like thinking
I think
big with Ashley?
No. It was always going to be like popular culture and then some way of putting theory, philosophy. I wasn't sure. I tried different versions, and that one seemed to be the one that didn't sound the worst or driest. So
it could be a pretty solid first year unit, popular culture and theory.
I think that's how I base everything off, is I just think like academic, how do I word this title in the driest sounding way?
Yeah. Some weird code, BFJ 102 : popular culture and theory.
Okay, I'm trademarking this for a future subject.
Yeah, so we'll post up a couple of syllabuses later on to Media Mothership. So you, for this, have been collaborating with us at Edge to create 5 little proof of concepts podcasts.
Yeah.
And today's, so you've launched them already. They're live in the wilderness on the internet.
Yep.
Right? People can get them via most podcasting platforms.
Pretty much. I
iTunes.
Thought it was everywhere, but like those sort of Amazon-owned ones. But it turns out it's on there too, apparently. So it seems to be everywhere. So wherever you get your podcasts.
This will be their first broadcast, I think, on Edge, though. So that's pretty world exclusive.
Oh, yes. I think this is the biggest audience it's ever had and probably ever will have. So
we'll keep an eye on the chat. Yeah. I always think I should actually try and, garner a bit of a publicity before we start, particularly when I've got great guests on like yourselves, the two of you. Well, at least you could grab your parents or your brother or your family to listen. Anyway, we'll think about that when we launch this episode as a podcast later, which we will be doing. So we're going to play episode 0. All right, so which kind of breaks down the purpose of the podcast you were setting up. as an academic. So this is a kind of academic podcast.
Yeah. So for sort of like, I guess, high school to first, second year sort of academic level.
So if there's anyone from Taroona High School listening and they think, wow, this sounds great, follow up with Ashley to get them into your English class to do a guest talk.
Yes, I'll happily come in and do a guest lecture.
Where can people get you?
They can find me on Blue Sky,
Blue
which
Sky.
is the Twitch clone, which is better. Sorry, not Twitch. Twitter clone, which is better.
It's Ashley
otherwise-
Remminga.
Yeah, Ashley Remminga, Blue Sky. Otherwise, just email me. I check my emails.
Like UTAS.
Yeah, just
Ashley
say
Remminga.
ashley.remminga@utas.
Because in your, in your older identity, the PhD identity, you're doing hardcore investigative research into cosplay, into trans identity in cosplay, gender flipping,
anime,
crossplay,
all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
It's just occurred to me. One quick update we should do while we're still in the getting to know you section of the show.
Yes.
You dropped a huge thought bomb on us like 2 months ago when you were on the show, revealing to us that you'd been given the title of, or you joined the Classification Board of Australia
Yes.
to begin your journey classifying content.
I have the
How's it going?
approved accreditation. I haven't got any sort of. I haven't done anything. It's all
Have you not
for.
classified anything
No,
yet?
I'm not looking to classify. I wanted to get sort of the more background to understand all the legal stuff for a journal I'm writing, but I am qualified to
immersive.
do it. And I don't know if at that time I was qualified for games as well. I am qualified for games now.
You gotta,
So
well, so far you've not started that classification journey hands-on yet?
no hands-on.
No
No
hands-on yet?
looking at
Alright.
films or anything and that.
Well, we'll always be looking for an update, but that is a good statement of expertise in this. So not only are we bringing you in as a academic, but also as a qualified classification officer.
Yeah, so I can say that this here coming up should be around the PG mark. Then I don't think we'll be going into the M rating, and I don't think it's necessarily general audience from the best of my memory.
Yeah.
So probably PG rating.
Because conceivably language would be the thing that could get us into trouble. Like boost
Possibly.
us up to an M rating if we,
Oh,
or even that. I mean, you have to go really blue, I'd
Yeah,
imagine
so-
these days. Because I noticed Triple J even has a lot of swears in their songs playing midday. So it seems
Yeah.
community standards.
there's probably
are a little
references
looser.
to violence in some of mine. So for some of the examples, so
What would get us over to an M rating? Do you think as a
to an
radio
M
show?
rating,
Like if we, obviously there's illegal things, but
certainly
I
if
don't think
we're talking. Do we want to push it to the M rating now?
No. Let's just know what the criteria is
Sort of, I would say,
without
no-
performing it.
probably going into a bit of detail about stuff like sexual violence
Yeah,
and things
yeah.
like that. Any sort of extreme mental harm could possibly.
Yeah. So any
distressing
explanations?
stuff, yeah. I
So-
won't go in any further than that because we will be pushing into.
That's true, yeah. Because once
So,
you
yeah.
even start the explanation process, you can find yourself performing or committing that act.
Yeah, so even just referencing it can bring
Yeah.
it into it. So
Yeah, I came across an academic that was saying this. Well, it was Mark McClelland, one of his papers, who was a well-known Australian academic, did a lot of research. In the area that
amazing
you're doing.
academic. Yeah, I've been reading all his work. So yeah.
And he was telling me about he was doing a paper on part of his research around Lolita and so forth, and Australian legislation, and he was explaining he can't, as he was talking, he was saying he has to be careful because he can't explain things that could be construed as the steps to access this material.
Yeah.
That anything that would be conceived as providing information as to how to access this material is also in breach
Yeah.
of the criteria. So even if you're not doing anything that's sexually or legally offensive, nevertheless explaining how to access that or where you procured it, which of course is an issue when you're talking about the methodology you used for your research.
Yeah, and that's part of why I got that accreditation in the first place, was because I was writing a journal to basically continue that work, because I found similar sort of boundaries with my own research, what I could and couldn't say. So I wanted to critique that. So that's an aside.
Yeah, very meta. We've already gone very meta. And I would love to do a whole show on how we cannot do M-rated things while talking about M-rated things.
Oh, that would be fun and challenging.
All right, so to bring it back to the podcast, because I do want to play this intro. So this is 1 minute 32, Introduction to Popular Culture and Theory. What is this about? Any points that people should know before they hear this?
So just the introduction, just basically a welcome to my... It's one of those things where you click on YouTube and it plays like, welcome to my channel.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just a bit of an overview about who I am, what I hope to achieve in the podcast, and positive vibes, like and subscribe.
Well, we'll see how far we get through it, because I guess you've got to capture people's attention.
Yes.
So we'll because as you're saying, it's one of these kind of standard little things that we'll come across when we go into a new YouTube page, and it's a little intro to let us know this is what this piece is about. So we'll play it and hear it. Hopefully it'll play.
Welcome to Popular Culture and Theory, joining you from the unceded lands of the Palawa people in what we now call Hobart. I'm your host, Ashley Remminga, using she/her pronouns, a PhD candidate at the University of Tasmania. I'm situated within the School of Languages and Culture with a background in gender studies and media studies. My specific area of expertise is on gender diversity within Japanese popular culture.
So gender diversity in Japanese popular culture, and you've done research in, was it Swinburne?
Pardon?
Which university?
La Trobe University,
yeah. And people, if they want to know more, can listen to a previous episode of Media Mothership.
Yes, I've been on a few.
Yeah. So. For that. Okay, so pushing forward.
So you may be wondering, what is the point of this podcast? What I've observed from students I've taught is that many of the key theories, terms, and scholars discussed in humanities and social sciences are often not fully understood, partially because the anecdotes they use are dry, along with the text they use being very dry and wordy, and it can be significantly outdated within our modern context, which ultimately means that the content is inaccessible to many. Given so many of us consume popular culture, hence the name popular culture, and given I am already applying many of these sociological concepts to my own research, I thought it would be good to create this podcast as a means to assist others in breaking down these complex theories in ways that are a bit more accessible to the average person. So hopefully you will enjoy this podcast, and if you do, please share it around, and hopefully you learn something.
Nice, good call to action at the end. Share it around. I think all of us, though, have that issue of how to make content relatable. Kentaro, you're a third-year student.
I'm going into third year, yeah.
Third year, going to be minted into the third-year space shortly. Have you ever done any humanities or social science units yet?
So far, I don't think I have. I think they've mostly been within the ICT space.
But you've certainly probably had lectures where the examples that they've used haven't quite made sense. Or they've been really old. Like, do you recall any, do they talk about Tron when they're explaining computing? Sorry, I'm trying to think of a really dated early 80s film that had computing in it.
No, I don't think they did.
Any of the references, are the references old, are the references new, often? Sorry, it's a very broad question.
I think as for non-technical references, because if they're technical, then by nature, some of them will be old, but you have to understand them anyway. I think that even because take for example computer games, even though there is a history behind computer games, it's only we're only going 1 or 2 human generations back, relatively speaking, or maybe 3 at most. And so that's still sort of inside. I know I'm not going off track, but it's still sort of inside our collective memory. So we still sort of understand. We know what Pac-Man is, even though we may have never played it at the arcade.
Yes, yeah. And well, I guess you're looking for entry points.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
Into trying to then get into the more complicated explanations.
Yeah.
But it can be difficult, and particularly when you've got international students, like a really diverse cohort of students in a class.
Yeah, especially.
How you can find that common ground to then start building towards, here's the assessment that's coming up, here's the knowledge you guys need to know. How do we make sense of that? It is quite a challenge. So how have you found it, Ashley? I mean...
well, listening to that, I hate it so much.
Really?
But
Sounds
just that entire thing, because it goes against everything I set out to do in that podcast, which is to make it accessible. I don't know why I made it so, like, the jargon of this language is complex. No, I should have just said it needs to be easier to understand. Like, that's what I wanted to unpack, was to make the language also more easy to be understood. But in doing that, I worried I was getting too simplistic to a point where, since it was going out to all these other academics, I was scared they were going to be like, are you actually smart, or are you just like faking it till you make?
Yeah, the imposter syndrome is an issue. But I do think, if we're looking for what the core thing is this needs to do, which explains why it exists, I feel like you provide a very rational reason for it, which is these can be quite complicated concepts, and a lot of it's kind of lost in translation because of poorly chosen examples that aren't.
See, that's how I should have described it, but I didn't describe it like that. I took 5 sentences to say that.
All right, well let's put it into action then.
Oh gosh.
So we'll jump to episode 1, because we were talking about this a bit, and we've got some examples to follow up with. We'll just start the setup for it, and then the example you give, which I think is a really well chosen one. So here we go, episode 1, semiotic sign, signifier, and signified.
Welcome to Popular Culture and Theory, joining you from the unceded lands of the Palawa people in what we now call Hobart. I'm your host, Ashley Remminga. One of the most important concepts to understand for this podcast is semiotics. So over the course of this and the following few podcasts, we will unpack a number of key terms that are essential to understand in relation to semiotics, social sciences, and this podcast. But to begin with, what is semiotics? Put simply, semiotics is the study of signs. Although the origin of semiotics is somewhat disputed and debated, it is generally accepted that Swiss philosopher Ferdinand de Saussure had one of the most profound influences over the field of semiotics. So that's good and all, but it doesn't mean much if we don't understand what signs are. So what are signs? Signs are the basic unit of communication. This is very vague, and I've deliberately left it this vague as there is some misunderstanding surrounding what a sign is and what it isn't. But let's just pause for a moment and apply what we understand about signs to something a bit more familiar, a bit more accessible, Pokemon cards. Let's take an Eevee Pokemon card. So,
which character is Eevee again? That's the
Eevee
one...
is... sorry, I've got a puppy who looks just like it, called Eevee as well. So I've got this mental image in my head. Eevee's this little fluffy ball of brown ball.
Right.
Like, not a ball, but a fluffy, like, dog creature.
And what we're talking about, what the examples you're moving into here, is the card game version?
Yeah,
I mean,
so
they're all the same, I guess, in terms of... But the semiotics of it is the card.
Yeah, so this is all using cards because Pokemon cards are somewhat popular at the moment. And so I thought this is one of the more well-known characters. It's somewhat easy to understand, and of the symbols, it's a bit easier to understand than some of the others.
Because on a Pokemon card, the card game, it's a battle game, it's a competitive game. You're building your deck, and on those cards, much like a playing deck, I guess, with a Nine of Hearts, King of Hearts, and so forth. There's images on it, as well as some text in the case of Pokemon. And those do all the heavy lifting to explain the kind of score, the kind of strengths, how to use this card when you're performing it. So here you're gonna break it down a little bit further with filling out the example further, so we'll get back to it.
Look at the face of the Pokemon card. In the top right-hand corner of this card, there is a star-like symbol. So let's just take that general thing and call it our sign for the purpose of this discussion. Now, here's a question for you. What part of that star makes it a sign? So the star-like symbol, so I've got the Pokemon card and there's a star symbol in the top right-hand corner.
Yeah.
And the question you're kind of hypothetically asking here is, what part of that star makes it a sign?
Yeah.
All right. SMS in now.
Yeah. You've got a couple seconds
to tell us what it is. I should have some... maybe I do have some thinking music to quickly put up. Here we go.
While we give some time to think, I will comment that I really hated hearing me say Ferdinand de Saussure. It's just, I tried to pronounce it correctly, and his name is so difficult to pronounce.
You got a name check. It's really good to name check. It shows the sources you're using to build upon to make your argument, and people can go back to the source. But it's always tricky with French names.
It is so difficult.
De Saussure.
De Saussure. It's like Saussure, but it's how you pronounce it. And I hear other people say it just rolls off their tongue. I'm like, how do you do this?
Well, I'm really hoping to get around to an example of mispronunciation. I did one myself cooking recently where I was making hamburgers, and I was using Worcestershire sauce. Yeah. And the way I was saying Worcestershire sauce made me feel I was mispronouncing it. And I had to keep saying it. It's like Worcestershire sauce. I think I'm saying it okay now, but even when I say it now, I'm feeling like I'm misemphasizing a certain syllable. Worcestershire. And the more you overthink it, the more dangerous it becomes. So the sign of the star in the top right-hand corner. We have a post from 43 hours ago, though I don't think that's the one for us, saying Africa. So
it is not Africa.
It's not Africa on the star. So sign, right? So what part of... So I'm assuming it's the star itself, like the way it's drawn?
I realize my question is probably really awful because I'm thinking more the components that...
Because you got signified.
There we go. Yeah,
physical
Stop
things.
spoiling my podcast.
Let's jump into the podcast there.
Yes, but you're right.
Mentioned, a sign is a basic unit of communication. So according to Saussure, signs are comprised of two parts, a signifier and signified. So this is where we sometimes get confused by what a sign is. So the signifier is the physical component. This could be words or sounds. So many people will look at that corner image and think that is the sign because it is physical. But that's not the case, and we will unpack this further. The signified, which is the second term, is the meaning component of the sign. So it could be the completed image or the general concept.
So the star isn't the sign, but is the star the signifier?
So the star is... We're going to call the star the sign, and within it, the image part of it is the signifier.
Yep, so the drawn little 5-pointed star, if it's 5-pointed or whatever it is, that image that we see, we see that.
Yeah. That will be the signifier, and the signified is the meaning that we'll take from that.
Yes, and it seems pretty obvious in a way. It's like, why are they explaining this? It's very obvious. But then through some of the examples we'll get around to in a
Well,
sec.
yeah, you need to understand that it's not just the star, because if it hasn't got a meaning attached to it, then it's not a sign. It's just an image. It's like an icon,
And
but not
potentially,
even.
and potentially people could argue about what it is.
Yes.
It's like, you're trying to explain to someone how to play the game, and you say, well, count the number of stars on your card, and they're saying, I don't see any stars. And that could be a breakdown of that sign process.
Yeah, I'm not saying this is necessarily always like you can rip into what other people have said in this field of signs and semiotics, and I've deliberately left out processes of signification here, and it gets messy.
does.
Yeah,
So we'll try to keep it simple.
keep it simple.
All right, we'll push on. So we're 2 minutes 45. We'll push on a little further to hear the unpacking of this.
That comes from this particular signifier. So let's go back to that Pokemon card. The star symbol itself is the signifier. It's the visual component of the sign, whether that is the colored circle, the star in it, that is the signifier. Now, the meaning of this particular sign is that the symbol represents this sense of being a normal type Pokemon. So we can say that this here is the signified. We can associate that the signified is the meaning that we get from this particular symbol.
So normal Pokemon.
Yeah, basically the attribute of the Pokemon is what we can draw from. Again, I overcomplicated it.
No.
yeah.
So let's try and hold on to that idea. So here we're talking about moments in which there's a sign and people are explaining. Well, I guess okay. So let's see this in action as you've done with the Pokemon card. So I've tried to think of some examples, and I'd love the discussion around whether these are good or bad examples from this, in terms of moments where there's a signifier, right? So there's a discussion around a sign, and here we see the moment where the person's saying this signifier means these things. So the signified that they're linking to the signifier are important for reasons. So the first example I want to play before I lose what I'm talking about is an interview with Eric Idle talking about Monty Python. And the question is about why Monty Python's still popular after 50 years. So he explains it here, I think, in a quite interesting way. So we'll listen to this and talk a little bit about, in particular, why he's saying it matters whether something's black and white or color, right? So I'm thinking they're the two concepts. Maybe it's more than signs, but anyway, we'll listen to what he says. Eventually, it's loading.
Was very close to the comedian, and vice versa. And because I was able to play guitar, I was able to hang out with a lot of them.
He's answering. Here he is.
And that's
so
kind of a nice thing to do.
Questions going.
The longevity of that work too. So I've watched Monty Python with my two teenagers, and they've laughed. Sometimes we're laughing at different things, Eric, but that comedy, it still works.
I know it is intriguing, and it's also not supposed to be. I mean, the Holy Grail's 50 years old next year. I mean, I don't remember watching 50-year. I suppose we watched some 50-year-old comedies. I mean, we watched Harold Lloyd and Laurel and Hardy and things like that. But they seemed in a different era because they were in black and white. And I think one of our luckiest things was that when we first did the TV show, we were only 3 months from being in black and white. Color was new, and we were in color. So we were both digital, which is great because it can survive, and we were in color. And those are the only two reasons I can explain why the longevity of it is, because we're still in the digital era.
Well, that's interesting.
Such an interesting point. So that's from Great Chats with Francesca Rudkin, to not mispronounce. And it's an interview with Eric Idle, recently from December 30th, 2024. Really interesting point there about, I guess it's bigger point about texts, which I know you get around to on one of your later episodes.
Yeah, so make sure you check that out.
So not to spoil any of that, but what I find interesting there is that debate around the meaning of old texts, right? So if we could break it down simply as saying, here, one definition semiotically of old text is it's boring and irrelevant, right? So as you're saying, the whole purpose of the podcast is to make things relevant, try relevant examples, and he's saying semiotically, why, like, his explanation for why Monty Python still matters today, well, semiotically it's interesting because it's old, and the signifier old has a signified of unrelated, boring, kind of, I guess, uninteresting, right? So that he's defining at one level Monty Python as being 50 years ago, but then he's saying if it was black and white, that would have trapped it as a text that semiotically would have been ancient. Whereas because it just managed to get broadcast as color came in, it's semiotically coded, present world still, like new, well, not new, but still tight, like of the modern era, as opposed to the ancient era, right? Black and white, ancient, color, modern. Is that holding up? Do you think semiotically?
I think I understand that. I mean, that was a lot to unpack.
Well, I guess why does it matter?
All I can get behind is Monty Python still relevant today in the same sense that they're describing there? And I would say perhaps not, with the digital era now transforming into the internet era. It's a lot more snippets of Monty Python. Like, do people actually go and watch all of Monty Python now? Or do they just watch the, the Black Knight and that, and these clips here and there, always look on the bright side of life, these classic moments, do they only look at that now? And
so I guess, yes, broadly, we'd need to accept that Monty Python is still popular today.
It is.
So I think they've said look, for example, at the YouTube channel, which still has a huge number of views and so forth. So while modes of engagement might have changed somewhat, the content still is unchanged in terms of, like, you watch some old content and think that's dated really badly. Like The Goodies, for instance, right?
Oh, I don't know. I like The Goodies.
Some of The Goodies actually still holds up still well. Maybe early black and white Doctor Who. I don't know. I mean, the I guess the idea of black and white versus color as a reason of it. I mean, I guess you could still disagree, which is why it's semiotically interesting, where some people wouldn't see.
I would probably contend there's a lot of I think it's got a lot to do with age and a lot of this sort of factoring in this sort of intersectionality with age and interpretation and meanings and defining things that are funny and whatnot to a particular group of people at a particular good point in time. Like I think they were mentioning about certain parts that some people laugh at, certain bits that other people don't laugh at. And I just come back to sort of more, I guess, meme culture today. And I have so many friends who are losing their mind around the whole Skibbity meme. And I'm like, you guys were going crazy about Shrek memes and all these other ones which are equally as dumb. And before that, there were lolcats and lol internet. And
well, this has been one of the arguments around why Monty Python is still relevant today, that the type of comedy they were delivering was absurdist.
Yeah.
That it was quite nonsensical, and that's how it's avoided that feeling of being too dated. That absurdity of it, the bizarre juxtapositions, has meant it hasn't fallen into the trap of being, racially or in a gendered sense, unprogressive and maintaining old stereotypes, because by its very nature it was absurdist. It was constantly putting bizarre juxtaposition. There's one great sketch they had in that the article that's unpacking it later about a police officer kind of just offering to go back home with this other guy. Again, suggesting this kind of transgressive sexual politics. Just the absurdity of it at the time managed for it to get gotten away with, but it's held up remarkably well. Even if the performers themselves, like I know John Cleese, for instance, on record seems to have remarkably unprogressive attitudes to certain things. So it's interesting that the content though, that they were created because of its absurdity has has been quite held up.
Yeah, the absurdity and absurdist humor is such a interesting thing to unpack through like semiotics and signs and that, because of how they're sort of subverted and I guess challenged at times. The codes and conventions are disrupted in ways that are played with in, I guess, interesting ways.
Because I think and again we can bring in other concepts later, like Stuart Hall's like, what have you got? The preferred meaning, the contested meaning,
dominant reading and preferred reading. Yeah, there's many different names for the same thing.
All right, let's see if we can use another example and try to explain it through semiotics. So this is an example talking of memes, which has been picked up from a film. The title, headline on Kotaku is "One of the weirdest movie moments of 2024 happened in a film nobody watched." The subtitle being "A bizarre scene in Kraven the Hunter has mostly gone unnoticed, and that's a shame." And this was posted December 27th, 2024. Since this article has been posted, there's been more discussion about this particular scene. What we'll do is we'll play it now, and we'll talk about why this scene seems to be so confusing and bizarre. Right? Semiotically, I guess the signified and signify here seems to have broken down somewhat to create confusion. So just to explain what we're going to hear here. So this is a scene from the absolute bomb of a movie, Kraven the Hunter, which seems to have now been recognized as Sony's worst effort in their superhero. Have you seen Kraven the Hunter?
I have
Kentaro?
not.
It's not on your list? Yeah,
No,
you've dodged a bullet. But people are saying, it did worse than Morbius. You catch Morbius, any of the...
I caught the memes, but I didn't catch the film itself.
Well, this is probably the only way people are going to see anything about Kraven the Hunter. So in this scene, we have the villain character who later on becomes the Rhino. In this scene, he's still human. Now, one of his henchmen has come into the room to inform our villain, the Rhino, that the other henchmen have all been killed and they haven't been able to get Kraven. And what is on page, I imagine on the script pages, Rhino is informed this, and Rhino's angry. However, in audio, what we'll hear is an odd expression of that anger. Visually, you'll see him perform a scream, but audio-wise, So let's listen to this now.
The Kravenov hit failed. All of our guys are dead.
Sorry, excuse the laughter. That laughter was us, not from the movie. That gurgling sound was, the sound that he made. I mean, what we see here is the character screaming, right? So we see the mouth fully open, rage on the face, but we hear a strangled gargle. Semiotically, what's going on there, Ashley?
Well, what it's clearly is that there is this breakdown between what the meaning of what should be going on in that scene versus the signifier, the component of the sound itself, like the context behind it, this sort of signified meaning of anger and distress and distress and everything that should be a menacing like growl of a anger and rage is challenged by this inconsistent sign which is saying like gargling noises, I suppose, this sort of signifier which is just awful sound.
It is. Look, and at the time there was some discussion in fan forums about what's going on there. Was it a production problem? Was the actor delivering a take where they wanted to save their voice and so they didn't do a full scream, knowing that in post-production they'd overdub it? Was one explanation of it. The other one being, was this accidentally left in, right? Did the editing just skip it and not edit that out? From what I've read since, it appears to be the original performance was done silently. So it was a silent rage that the actor felt would be a novel way of communicating a moment. And at the time, he said the performance got an applause, got a sense of, wow, that's really different. We'll go with that take. Then in post-production, it was decided to add sound. And weirdly, the discussion isn't about why that sound is there. The actor just said, and that was the sound that we went with in post-production. It's like, but it's so unusual. Like, it's better silent, I felt.
It would be so impactful, like, if it was silent and, like, that whole scene was silent with just subtitles. Like, just that would be, like, weird in a way that I think would draw you in. This is weird in a way that makes you uncomfortable and not in a good way.
It is interesting how it's been picked up as a meme, as a bit of thing that's been circulating on the internet. It does remind me of the advisory cautionary tale that you can never really make a meme, right? You can never really make a movie and say, okay, we want 5 memes to come out of this movie. I've scripted them and created them, and they will create memes. Because you couldn't anticipate this one, right? You couldn't say, okay, what we're going to do is the strangled gurgle scream, and that will meme it. And it's like, no, that will either get forgotten about or laughed at. But instead, just the oddity of it, the sense that it seemed to be a sincere performance and sincerely done unironically. Yeah. All right, so the next quick example, we've only got 5 minutes left.
Oh, dang.
I know, time's going very quickly. I'm hesitant to play this one because we might not be able to set it up with all of... Well, this is one, I mean, talking of mispronunciation, this is an interesting one that Ashley mentioned. Hold on, I'll have to go back to start. It's a scene. I'll explain the scene afterwards.
Cocaine.
It's the one and only Arnold Schwarzenegger from, what movie is this? This is Red Heat, right? So this is a movie where he's playing a Russian police officer and he's ripped off a prosthetic leg, pulled the plug out, great special sound effects throughout that, pulled the plug out and then tipped it outside to reveal this white powder coming out. But he said cocainum.
Yes.
Did you? And this is something you had firsthand experience of the confusion with.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can go to all the comments and just see everyone commenting like cocainum, what?
Not just cocaine, but the pure element itself, cocainium. Yes, it's an odd mispronunciation, and again, it's that confusion of semiotics, right? I mean, basically, the amusement and the reason why there's a whole YouTube clip here called cocainum is a semiotic confusion. It's like, why has he not said cocaine? Why has he said cocainum? Does that mean something? What is the signifier signified here? So yes, what is the signifier signified of cocainum?
Oh gosh. I think I've just taken cocainum. Like this my brain is not ready to answer a question this profound.
So the signifier is the physical thing,
Yeah, so the word cocainum.
Cocainum is the thing.
Perhaps you could also argue the cocaine itself is probably, maybe the meaning behind it is the cocaine, the drugs, the context in which it's being studied.
Well, yes, what is signified by this? Is it an Arnie performance? Is the signified of cocainum Arnie
I think we could probably get out that Arnie cannot speak Russian.
Yeah.
But
and I guess that's what the YouTube posts are underneath it. It's all this kind of how witty can my signified be of the Arnie signifier. The Arnie signifier is him saying cocainum, and then getting a good, the top YouTube comment has 106,000 thumbs up. And that's the one, not just cocaine, but the pure element itself, cocainum. And that's a good signified comic reaction, right?
Well, I think that like ratio shows a very signified signifier relation that you get the like, the approving, I agree with this, and then the signified being they have no idea what Arnie's on about.
Look, I mean, it feels like to be a good social media advisor, you need to know your semiotics, right? The whole, the what is it? The rabbit hole of semiotics, right? Because as you're saying, we could now unpack what we're looking at right now, which is what is the semiotics of the thumbs up? What is the semiotics of the 106K for some people, is it just people jumping on a bandwagon? Is it a genuine democratic expression of a public sphere? Is it, because there's 253 replies underneath that as well.
Well, probably the easiest way to just sort of break down signs, signifier, signified, even probably easier than my Pokemon card example, is just look at a giveaway sign that you see on the road. Many of you are probably driving, listening to this. The sign itself, the giveaway sign, you've got the signifier being, the sign itself, the written word give way, the triangle, and then the signified is, depending on where you are in Hobart, just keep going. If
Ashley does not represent edges.
Oh, no, I'm not encouraging that. I'm just saying this is what it means, apparently, to some people, but the approach that you should be doing is you're meant to, slow down and be cautious, because it's saying there's this sense of potentially oncoming
meant to come
traffic
to
or
a
people.
complete rest. I mean, you're at P's yet, Kentaro?
P's.
So you're meant to come to a complete stop at a giveaway sign, or can you do a rolling stop? I think a rolling stop.
I'm fairly certain. Giveaway is a rolling stop.
It is.
It's the stop sign is the stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was told that when you get to a stop sign, you should say the letters STOP in your mind so that you've stopped sufficiently, right? For a
It's
sufficient
actually
time.
really interesting.
Isn't that
I haven't
interesting?
had
Yeah.
that one before.
Oh, we're going to have
Signify,
all the
signify.
road tips here.
Well, and that's
that.
really semiotics, isn't it? As soon as you start breaking down how to behave when you see a sign when you're driving, you're talking about signifiers and signifieds.
Yeah.
And some people will be doing the wrong signifiers.
Yeah, they'll grab their own meanings, or they just
they'll
won't
say,
know.
"Well, it's
They won't
orange."
necessarily know what the signified is, so they make it up themselves, which is what you shouldn't be doing if you're on the road.
Which roundabouts, I think,
Yeah.
for people who have never driven through a roundabout,
Yep.
must present that to them, right? If you've never encountered a roundabout before, you're an international driver, you've come down to Australia from, I don't know, somewhere that doesn't have roundabouts, it can be very confusing as to, who am I giving way to? What is this object? What is its meaning? And
So-
it's very
Cars are just some of the best when it comes to semiotics. We have these flashing lights on one side of the car. What does that mean? You're indicating to go over a lane, or you're pulling out. And
if you get it wrong, it's bad news.
yeah, and if you get it wrong, you get a situation like the Kraven the Hunter, where everyone's like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, actually, there's a couple of YouTube channels which do look at those kind of crazy road behaviors. So defensive driving, people, all the way. Defensive driving is probably a good semiotic frame to have, right? You should be semiotically defensive, right? There could be various meanings from a sign. Just because you feel that's the right meaning doesn't mean everyone shares that.
Yes, the correct meaning for the road rules and the signs, you should read up on it and go to the official learner guide if you're in doubt.
If you are looking for careers, or if you are looking how to drive a car better, probably doing a first-year humanities unit
I
might
would
be
strongly
helpful.
suggest
That's
that, and
semiotics.
not just because it would probably give me more work, but yeah, no.
Where now I'm really I'm thinking maybe air traffic coordinator, right? They need to get the
Yes.
semiotics down really well. Pilots.
Yeah. Well, there's also that Hobart Airport has this beautiful thing. I've never seen it at any other airport, but they've got paddles for kids to put on a high-vis vest, and just like table tennis paddles, and they can in the window copy the other people. So
Really?
you've got this,
I've never seen that. Wow.
Yeah, so there's this beautiful semiotics of the I guess the parallels between the paddle pop design versus the incoming thing. So you get this sort of parallels, and the high
'Cause you're
vis vest, what
directing
it
where the
means,
plane's
and the
going.
authority, and because of where it's positioned, you get this sort of sense that you're the one directing it in when you're. I don't want to break any kids' hearts. You are definitely bringing it in, parents. You know.
Fascinating. Well, there we go. Getting around to actually playing some real world links there to semiotics. That's been Media Mothership for another week. Thank you, Ashley, for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kentaro, for providing the third year perspective, or the to become third year this year perspective.
You're most welcome.
And you can find out more about Media Mothership on YouTube or Twitch or on the website or on edgeradio.org.au. Ashley's work is up on your own webpage. Do you want to promote that?
I've got a webpage, just Ashley Remminga. You can go there. You can go to YouTube to find the podcast. You can go to any podcast places, whatever you like, whatever works for you. I don't get paid for any of that. So check it out wherever.
So we'll think about semiotics over this week and continue to expand our horizons with more interesting media theory ideas in the new year. Coming up next, probably just music.
You're listening to Edge Radio.